Hey team, I am coming to you at the mouth of our last week for this term. For me, the course has really flown by, and I want to thank you again for making this experience so fruitful for me. Um, I want to take the opportunity to look back quickly on week 10 and to help you look forward to our final week together to make sure that we have all of our ends tied. At the end of week 10, you submitted the work that you've been, putting so much effort into for this term, your final paper. During week 11, I will be taking a bulk of my time going through each of those papers and reading all of that work that you've manifested in that. As I noted in the last video, you will notice that there is a difference in how I comment and grade your final paper. There may or may not be some marginal commenting if I feel that it's needed or necessary or functional. I will certainly come in with some marginal commenting. But mostly what you can expect from my commenting on your final paper is to see the rubric. And I do hope and invite and encourage you to hit me up on Skype during office hours to discuss your paper in more detail if you would like more than what the rubric has to offer. I do understand that each of you put a great deal of work into this final product, and I have seen from almost all of you a number of revisions and met with you during conferences about the paper. So I feel as if this final step along this line of inquiry is it brings you to a point where I think the rubric will suffice in being able to communicate to you the strengths and the areas that need improvement, especially when taken in conjunction with my comments from your response papers of the past, where there's been rigorous commenting. You should be able to understand by this point more of a shorthand approach. On the other hand, that just isn't enough for some students, and that's absolutely understandable. And it's something that I encourage you to do. Just come to office hours. We can discuss your paper at length, especially if you're interested in getting your piece published or submitting an abstract for presentation at a conference, which I hope you are all considering, because that's exactly what we're aiming for with this final work. Also, at the end of week 10, you were to post your final draft in the week 11 peer review discussion forum. If you haven't done that yet, don't worry. You can just do it here at the top of week 11. But go ahead and post your final draft for other students to read. Feel free to read your peers' works to your heart's delight, and take the opportunity to become a kind of judge, a kind of connoisseur of language, a kind of connoisseur of this genre in your own right, and to critique these works from the heart and from the core of what you've learned in this course and in other courses in your graduate study here at SNHU. Here in week 11, I ask that you go ahead and conduct a peer review of some papers of your choice. And peer review can be a very daunting task, especially if you are not somebody who feels comfortable critiquing other people. So I want to take an opportunity here to offer you a couple insights that can help you to really execute peer review in a way that feels comfortable for you. The first thing to keep in mind when you approach any kind of peer review situation is that you need to care about the process of peer review. And what that means is, in order to perform a high level of this activity, you need to really be invested in why peer review is important. So the first thing to do before you set out is to analyze what the act of peer review can accomplish for you. What are the stakes of peer review? That's a good place to start. What does it mean for you? Now, for me, peer review is an excellent opportunity to practice how to critique a work, a written work from another person. For those of you who are interested in being professors or teachers or getting published, in academic journals, this is a really key thing to know how to do. Also, for those of you who want to go into editing or publishing jobs, it's pretty key. So that's a big stake, is that it gives you the opportunity to practice the rhetoric of reviewing people's work, which is really an art form in itself and takes a lot of practice. The second stake that comes to mind is during peer review, a writer has the opportunity to get a plethora of different kinds of feedback from individuals with various backgrounds and interests and various, different eyes for things. As a professor in this course, I have a very particular sensibility about what I think is good writing. And I've tried to communicate that to you very clearly. You'll find throughout your career that every single person fluctuates in terms of the steps along the line of inquiry that they consider most important. For me, it's obviously argumentation and development of ideas. Those are two things that I think are absolutely hands down the most important part of this genre. Other people, however, might value ethos perhaps a little bit more strongly than I do. So it is very nice to see how your peers are going to judge your work when they're coming to it with perhaps a different value system. I think that when it comes to the academic genre, you'll find that most value systems are the same because this genre asks for very particular things. However, certain people champion aspects along that line of inquiry more than others. So that I think that's a great thing. It's a great thing to have that kind of feedback on your work. And you can take the peer review that you get, and that should give you more of the specifics, which you aren't necessarily going to get from me in my final review of your final work. So it kind of fills in the gaps in that way for you in a way that gives you a lot of variety, which I think is exactly what you need at this point in the term, is that kind of variety. So as you approach peer review, after you think about what it means for you and why it's important for you to practice it and to participate in it, the next thing that you want to do is think about your rhetorical approach. Now, whenever you are reviewing somebody else's work, it's always important to keep in mind that when somebody gives you a piece of their writing, almost always they're giving you a piece of their soul or their heart. They're revealing something about themselves. Um, whether it's personal experience or whether it's just their personal style of writing. Writing for most people is a very intimate and personal action. And so when they share it, they become very nervous that the feedback that they're getting is going to be some kind of attack on their person. And I think that's a very natural thing to feel. When we share our works, we're sharing ourselves. And the last thing that anybody wants is to receive feedback that's going to feel like an attack on their values or on them, or, any aspect of their experiences. So it's very important to keep in mind that the first thing that you always want to know in a peer review are the strengths of the work. And it's true that every single work has strengths. Even if you have to dig for them, which luckily in this course you won't need to because we're all at a very high level here of writing. But what you want to do is put your finger on two or three really specific strengths that you feel that the essay articulates and make that strength known to the writer of the paper. So start with the positive and don't be vague about it. Being vague is the last thing that you ever want to do in a peer review. You don't want to say, oh, your ideas were really good and your paragraphs were developed and you had a good argument. You don't want to say anything like that because that could be applied to any paper. Use salient examples from the text to highlight your ideas. Instead of saying that something is good, use the kind of professional language that we've developed in this course where you can use terms of the trade that are going to let the writer know that you actually are paying attention to her key moves. What has been executed well? Give an example of that. Tell the writer why you enjoyed that or why you thought it was successful, how it contributed to the function of the paper as a whole. After you've done that, then you want to get into some of the more critical points of the paper. Now, one way to do this that I always recommend is to do this with the rubric in your hand. So if you aren't sure exactly what to look for, you want to look for what I would be looking for, and that is outlined in the rubric. So look at the rubric and ask yourself the question, is this paper organized? Is this paper clearly arguing something? Is there counter argument? How has the writer integrated evidence? Are the paragraphs developed and logical? Questions like this. That's what you want to interrogate. And put your finger on exactly what that is. If you have any suggestions to make that can make the paper stronger, then don't hold back. Let the writer know what those things are, because chances are this paper will go on to greater things. And the more feedback that the writer can get about, suggestions for strengthening arguments, or where she could go from here, what she could add, especially if you have any arguments her against her ethos, let the writer know that. For example, if you can see clearly a hole in the argument, or if you have a different perspective yourself, don't be afraid to get into those specifics, because that's only going to make the paper that much stronger. If you have any other questions about how to conduct a peer review, if you feel a little bit jittery, make sure that you hit me up on Skype, or even post your questions into one of our forums, where I'm sure that other students in this class will be happy to talk a little bit more about the how-tos of peer review, the whys of peer review, and we can really get something exceptional out of this process. Also, here in the final week of the course, I would really appreciate it if you did the course evaluations for SNHU. Those evaluations are exceptionally important, not just for me, in terms of being able to access your honest opinions about the course in an anonymous atmosphere where you really have nothing to lose. I'm able to see what has worked for some students as well as what hasn't. And I believe that that process helps me to be a better instructor. But it also benefits SNHU, because we're able to see what is working in terms of technology and technological approaches to the classroom. Also, the dean is able to see if the instructors at SNHU are being successful. And because I am a part-time instructor, the evaluations mean a lot in terms of whether or not part-time instructors are hired again for the next term. So those evaluations are key. Finally, evaluations are very important for you in helping you to reflect on your work and on what has happened in this whirlwind of a course, and what has been successful for you, what has helped you, what has hindered you. So it's a great opportunity. Please make sure that you do get on, follow the link that you were sent in your email from, I think the provost sent it to you, perhaps the dean, but I'm pretty sure it was the provost, and asking you to take a couple minutes out of your day and fill out that evaluation. Also, if you want to be a little bit more personable and less anonymous, I encourage you to post your reflections either in the discussion forums, or to shoot me an email and let me know your thoughts about the term. Some of you have done this already, and I really appreciate your feedback, but I continue to, want that from you. So if you feel like you have something to say, feel free to say it, whether it's positive or negative. I am not somebody who enjoys having a bunch of, sunshine blown up my ass just because students think that that's what I want to hear. It isn't. I do like to hear critical feedback. And I also, sometimes that means positive feedback as well. But I do like to feel like every course gives me an opportunity to critique my approach and to reapproach and reimagine courses for the next time around. So your opinion absolutely matters, because you and I are colleagues in this course, and we exchange our approaches together. We exchange our information freely. And I think that's a beautiful thing. I hope that you guys have a great week, and let's finish it with a bang.